Hello, hi, I'm Cliona. I'm the co-director of Seen and Heard, the Festival of New Work, and I'm a freelance producer and a freelance production manager.
Hello everyone, my name is Connolly. I am co-director of Seen and Heard with Cliona and a live music television producer and a musician.
Hello, this is bizarre. It's the first double access chat, so bear with me as I get very confused. What we might do is we might kind of split it at the beginning and maybe just talk to you separately, and then we kind of have a conversation about how the two of you kind of got together and worked so much together. So Cliona, growing up, was a stupid question, but was the arts the arts in your maybe for people that don't know, I mean, what was the arts in your life?
Yeah, I grew up in a theatre, is how I put it. My mum set up the Belltable Art Centre in Limerick, and I grew up there in the lighting box with the lovely Jerry Marr. And so, yeah, it was always in my life, and I did kind of a lot of drama classes and stuff in Limerick when I was growing up. And then she moved away from theatre and she got into visual arts. So she did a lot of an art gallery in Limerick, and then we moved to Dublin, and she worked in or she set up 2 art galleries in Dublin, and then she ended up setting up the Civic in Tala. And so it's always been there. I've always been dragged along to things, and I remember very young being sitting in the theatre and the programme falling off my lap and going to get it, and my mother grabbing me furiously and saying, "Don't move." And so learning all the etiquette was from a very young age, I suppose.
Yeah. Is it a wonder then that you haven't run away from the theatre rather than run away with the theatre?
Yeah, actually, and I suppose in terms of my siblings, one of them is in visual arts. Was in visual arts. She's now in kind of PR. The other 2 are musicians by trade, and my younger brother has kind of got into the theatre game of recent. Wow. So we all kind of fell along those ways. But yeah, I was the only Aegis to really submerge myself into the full aspects of theatre. And actually, my first professional show was a panto, and I always say, if you didn't leave after that, you're definitely made for it, because I still say it. It was my first professional job, and I've just the amount of respect I have for people who do panto, because it is impossible. And it is a nightmare for a solid 4 months with no let up. And so I used to come home crying. Like it was my first professional job, and I kind of, anytime since then that things have got rough, I think, well, if you got through that one, you're grand.
Come here, as a kid, obviously you were going to an awful lot of stuff and it was immersed in your house and that, but was a sense of you kind of, doing rather, was that kind of, can you remember when that kind of started to evolve you? Like, were you kind of always reading, were you putting on shows in home, were you one of those kids?
I was. I was. And I remember on holidays and stuff, like making friends with other kids, and then like dragging all the parents in, and and we'd got sheets and got whatever was around and made a show. Yeah, actually, I haven't thought about that in years. Yeah, I probably was. I was more, I would have written a lot of stuff as well, which I don't do at all now. And I loved reading, and I loved reading and writing, but I read a lot now, but I don't write anything, in a sense. And so I think it was only when I moved to Dublin, I joined DYT. And when I joined DYT, it opened my eyes to lots of other aspects of it. And so, like the Members One acts that they do, where you get a chance to do lighting or to do direct, to do different things than just performing. And so it gave you kind of an insight into all those other things. And then actually, one of my very first shows in DYT that my mother came to see, I remember afterwards, she claims this didn't happen. The difference of memories of your life. But she came along to see one of my shows, and afterwards I remember her saying, "You'd make a very good director." And me having performed in the show. So I remember at that point thinking, maybe I shouldn't actually pursue this acting malarkey. And so that probably changed a lot in my mind, unbeknownst to her or myself at the time.
And was it kind of like, before that, did you have a little secret kind of grow to kind of go, I'm going to be an actress? I'm not saying your mother changed your life that much, but I'm saying when you were younger, like, was it actors you kind of looked towards?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's absolutely what I wanted to do. And even I suppose I was in Dramsoc in UCD after DYT, and then I remember sending like headshots and CVs out to agents and trying to follow up on that and all that kind of stuff. I did a few little bits and pieces, but to be honest, I don't have that kind of thick skin. I probably have a different type of thick skin, but there's a certain thing that you need being an actor, and I don't think I have it. So I'm kind of glad that my mother actually, once again, my poor mother will kill me for all of this, but my mother said, or always says, acting is a disease, you'll get over it. That was her thing. She says it to well-known and actors who have been doing it for 20 or 30 years, asking them when they'll get over it. So it's kind of like I'm kind of happy with leaving that behind.
I think it's worth noting and worth saying that we've actually alluded to your mother a lot. It's Breach Dukes, obviously, who people that don't know, the wonderful Breach Dukes, and I think her legacy across the Irish art scene is not to be underestimated, and kind of in the best possible way. Breach kind of made her work go under the radar, and I mean her own work and her own influence go under the radar, and was fundamentally about amplifying other people and in the work that she did. So it's just want to kind of note that, and her obviously influence on you, Cliona. And can I just ask before I go to Caoimhe, when in DYT and in Dramsoc did the idea of the more kind of holistic view of the arts and cultural sector come to you, or was that later on?
I think it was, I realized in DYT that I loved doing quite a lot of the other side of things. Like I really loved doing lighting. I did it for a good few shows in DYT, and I don't know why I didn't follow that much more, but that was something I really had a grow for there. And then it was actually just straight out of college, I got an opportunity to do the panto, and the panto was as a production assistant. So I was basically assisting the producer, and I just found the entire thing fascinating because I came on board at the very, very start. Like I came on board, I think it was like May or something, like and so it was before casting, it was before anything, and so it was, I saw how a massive, I think it was £500,000 at the time production, and it was my first one, and so I saw how a massive production went from beginning to end, and I just found that really, really fascinating in all the different aspects of it, and I loved the idea of trying to produce something to that scale, and to pull all to have the bigger vision of the whole thing, and to try and pull all the bits together and make it work. And so I think that's, panto. There's a lot to answer for.
I'll come back to you in a minute. Caoimhe Connolly, welcome from Galway.
Sunshiny Galway.
Yeah. So what's your story? What was like what you growing up as a child?
Well, it's not such a mystery how Cliona and Caoimhe might have ended up as work wives. I grew up in Galway in the 80s, and I think at the time there was recession happening, and I think in times of conflict there's these pockets of communities and creativity, and Galway was a burst of colour. My father's a musician, and my mother was involved in Macnas, and so I grew up as a feral child really in fisheries fields, and as a small person, Pádraig Brannock or Rod Goodall or Little John or Eileen Gibbons, or these people would have been hugely influential. Paul Fahey was a performance artist in Macnas at the time, so I suppose much like Cliona, like the apple didn't really fall far from the tree, and it probably was never going to go another way really. I had always been performing and acting and training quite seriously as a youngster in acting, in terms of like Greek tragedy and Chinese mime, and I had done combat and conflict and all these kind of things, and then I had joined youth theatre. There was a very I was lucky enough to have a wonderful group of people in the 2 years that I was there, and so we each broke away and started our own theatre companies. I had my own company. I was probably 16 by this stage. We set up Project 06, but also I was lucky enough because I knew everybody in town, including the late, great Mike Diskin, who was a mentor of mine. So I was working in box office, in front of house, like, and doing sort of running events from quite young, and then working seasonally on festivals, on Courture, the Fla, the Galway Arts Festival. And, you know, we had a huge opportunity there to see huge spectacle. I never thought it was different. You know, my parents had come from a working class family, and so didn't have the luxury when they were at work. I would have to go, you know, so you're going to gigs, or you're going to big top events. You're seeing Steppenwolf or Rude Mechanics or James Thierry, or you're exposed to these huge outdoor spectacles all the time, and that sort of becomes part of your makeup, I suppose. And then much like Cliona, I had a very similar experience where I was working with a director as a performer on a big production for the Arts Festival, and I had heard from the production crew that he had said that I would make a very good director, and as an actor took this really badly. This is interesting how parallel these stories are. But I think he was probably right. And when I went to university, I kind of knocked the acting thing on the head. I think much like what Cliona was saying, I think ultimately I don't have the personality where I'm going to allow somebody to get up. Yeah, I was auditioning for RADA and Lambda and RSAMD and Rose Bruford and all of this. It had been my idea that I was going to train in the UK, and coming from such a madly bohemian background, I'd never seen that really ugly panel table of audition judgment. You know, I came from a place where art was a craft, and it didn't occur to me that you had to be good looking to be an actor, or like, it didn't. I found that whole side of things really gauche, and I don't think that I really was interested in allowing other people to make me feel like that. And so after training and acting from the ages of 4 to probably 19 or 20, I finished that. But I had been running companies at the time and working in venues and doing all this other side of the industry all the time. And so when I went to university, I actually studied film and TV production, and I found that hugely beneficial, because in TV particularly, time is money, and you can't really afford to have people that don't know how to do their job. There's a very definite plan, there's a structure, everything's really laid out, everything's really trashed out by the time it comes. There's a really rigorous process, and I thought that was going to be interesting to learn. And so but because I had already had quite a good job, I wasn't interested in, when I left university, in making coffee for people. I was already running festivals by that stage and working freelance at comedy festivals and Electric Picnic and things like that. And then after the obligatory move to Berlin in the mid-2000s, I came back to Dublin and was lucky enough to get hired by the Abbey Theatre as operations manager, and was there for 3 years. And it was after that this wonderful woman and I decided to take on the harebrained scheme of reopening a 17th century theatre just down the road from a number of other theatres, and everybody told us we were crazy.
We get back to the craziness of that in a minute, but I my mind is kind of still somewhere stuck back in that feral child in Fisherman's because I just there's a Salman Rushdie novel about your early years, but by the sound of it, that kind of magic realism. And I'm kind of interested in that stage, Caoimhe, around what was a massively seminal time in Galway. I mean, Galway is an amazing city at the best of times, but when you have all these things coming together at once, what sort of stuff were you involved in? Like when you say performances, were you performing with Mockness and places like that?
Yeah, so Cheerfully Hun, I think, was the first street parade I did, the Land Under the Sea, and it was quite a big one. And I don't know if you've seen the old photographs, like a life-size Gulliver, there were huge productions. I mean, outdoors, taking over the whole city really. And when I was quite young, so I'm talking maybe 3 or 4, I think those were the first. And like initially you're put on a float as a seaweed creature, or And then at the various productions, because there was drama groups, I remember doing productions that maybe had other children in, like just, I did a feature film when I was 10 that it just occurred to me as well. Somebody was shooting something in Kong. I can't remember that there was a lot of shows. Like I don't remember not being in a show. I remember Rod Goodall directing a production of Animal Farm that Jane Talbot and Charmaine Goodall did puppets for, and that was like a big court production. I must have been probably about 14 by that stage, but between the ages maybe of 4 and 14, there would have been like in the 60 maybe shows, you know.
Okay. And can we then talk to me about where the idea of kind of TV and studying that came from?
That was a strange left turn, I think, for me. I think because I'd always imagined that I would go to the UK and I would go after school to the UK, that all of a sudden when I decided that that wasn't going to work for me, I took, there was a year and I, you know, went to India and went traveling and was working on various art projects while I took that time after secondary school, would say, before studying. And I think at that time I knew that I wanted the third level education, but I also didn't think that it had to be linked to a career in any way for me, because I was already getting work and that was progressing fine in a way. So I think it was more that I was very interested in the subject, and you know, I had researched the course. It was in Cliona. It was being run by Celine Curtin, documentary lecture. Donal Haughey was working in the field. The editing lecturer, Lee, had worked in Paramount. Jim Vaughan was the photography lecturer. Vivian Dick was my film processes lecturer. Like, so I kind of just thought, this is going to be really interesting. And I feel, even though I didn't know at the time, having done it, it was absolutely the right choice in terms of understanding how powerful a tool television or imagery, or, you know, that you have this propaganda tool at your disposal, and it's really important to know how to use that and what you're saying, really.
Yeah. Cliona, I'll come back to you in a second. I'm just so aware, but you know, just something you said there, like, oh yeah, took a year out and I went to India, but that's not really important. And there's a lot. There's kind of an amazing story in that, and I'm fascinated with the pair of you actually in relation to coming from that kind of bohemian arts, you know, immersion in your families, and the two of you having this really, really structured internal push on both yourselves and your work, and that's very not unusual, but that's very interesting. And Cliona, now if I clean it for a second, was that something that was always there? That kind of it's the wrong word, but I'm going to use that kind of structured business-like approach to things.
OCD is what I call it, but yeah, I suppose it was in a sense. I remember actually, in my secondary school, you couldn't. I went to an odd secondary school in Dublin. I went to Closhescon. It was an all-Irish school, but on the grounds there was Closhescon and Closhescon, which is the boys' school. And for some unknown reason, from first to fourth year, you were separated, but on the same grounds. And then in fifth and sixth year, they mixed you back in again so that they could offer more subjects, which is mad at the height of hormones. And like, it was madness. The entire thing was mad. But it was a fabulous school in terms of education. But because of that, I did business literally for fifth and sixth year, and it was just an option that was there that was never there before. And I think I got an A1 like immediately. I suspect, just in terms of it was something I absolutely adored. I've just found it absolutely fascinating, and I loved the idea of a mix of the two worlds actually. And it's not, I know people say you shouldn't say arts as a business, and you know, we shouldn't talk about things as products, and we shouldn't whatever, but it's not about treating it like that with business benchmarks, but it's about bringing business thinking into the arts to help it in some way, I suppose. But like in terms of the OCD side of it, yeah, that's always been a part of me. And actually, myself and Caoimhe are incredibly similar on our OCD levels and the way that we structure things and the way that we structure our work. Which make things it makes it difficult for other people to work with us. I find possibly they're a little scared. This year, for the first time, we had a production our coordinator, a festival coordinator, who I think was a little taken aback at the start, and it took a while to get into the rhythm of our rhythms, I suppose.
But I suppose there's and maybe I'll come back to you on this, Caoimhe. There's a actually on one of the previous Access chats, Clelia Murphy was really interested in talking about the whole thing as show business, that we're all in show business, and it's kind of, you know, it's not to then have us all make excuses about why we talk about it like a business. It doesn't diminish the art bit to have it, because I feel that, you know, an awful lot of problems occur or have occurred over many years when those two roles, even in organizations, when those two roles split, that the artist couldn't possibly have the brains to manage money and budgets and processes, and the general manager role, or would have to mind or just make sure that fucking artist doesn't bankrupt us. And I think that, and it's interesting that the people that I really admire and really kind of feel akin with are the people that are right up the middle on that, so Caoimhe, for you, like, that sense seemed to be very, very early. And how did that come about for you, that sense of this is process, this is as much as the madness of growing up in Galway and having that kind of amazing life, but the actual grounded piece?
Well, actually, apart from maybe natural personality traits in terms of like specifics, or I think if things are very chaotic and you are growing up in such a colorful madcap environment, it's probably quite a natural instinct to try and make sense of it or structure it in some way. But I also think maybe the structure or the business application maybe that people see about me and Cliona, I think it's important to note that, we don't see ourselves as kind of commercial producers, and we don't see ourselves as business people, even though we both know we're capable of doing those things. I think we're both hopelessly romantic about art. Like, we believe that will change the world, and that expression and community and those things, and we're quite soppy and sentimental about that. And so finding a way to make sure that thrives is really what that, the attack that you might see in terms of determination of making something work. It's to fulfill something else that you believe is a worthy cause.
Yeah. No, sorry, it's not at all. I have never felt attacked by either of you, but I think it's more in relation to holding those two spaces together. And I think that's a really, really powerful kind of place. That kind of, yes, the manifestation of it is in the artistic, but having that kind of backbone, I suppose, within oneself is kind of a really powerful thing as well.
I don't think it's anything we've ever thought about separately, like as in separating it. It's not something that separates.
Yeah. So come here, let's skip forward then to 2007 when you met, and kind of, how did that happen?
No, it was 2009?
No, I feel like it was 2011.
11.
November 2011, I'm going to say.
You're correct.
So how did that happen?
Yeah. I through Patrick Sutton, essentially, is the short answer. I had finished working in the Abbey and had met Patrick for coffee, as was my wont to do, to talk about state of affairs. I had met him through the Abbey, and we always got on very well. I found his large personality to be very entertaining, and he knew everybody in the arts world. And I suppose I had only been living in Dublin maybe 2 or 3 years at that stage. So we had a lot of people that we knew in common, I suppose. And Cliona was working in the Gaiety school, is that right?
I was doing Gaiety school, yeah, and Smock. Yeah. Smock had just started, like, so I had, I was running Gaiety school and trying to get Smock finished along with when you came on, yeah.
Yeah. So I was kind of brought in to project manage a build. My understanding was that you would sort of oversee seats, lights, sound, put a box office in, put a bar in, sort of put together some kind of organizational chart, figure out how the systems were going to work. And then my plan was kind of after 5 months that I would go on my merry way. But then I met Cliona Dukes and we liked each other. We had a very frank conversation the first time we sat down, and I really liked how maybe in an industry where people are afraid to speak the truth because everybody wants to be nice or be seen to be nice all the time, that having a very upfront conversation right off the bat, I knew that she wasn't bullshitting me in any way, and I really appreciated that.
Cliona, is that how you remember it?
Yeah, actually. There had been a bit of misunderstandings and stuff about, because the Smock project was getting off the ground, and there was no real structure to it getting off the ground, and around that time, like November, December, the Niamh Byrne at the time, now Niamh Ferry, had left the Gaiety school. She had taken Smock up from 2006 when they signed the lease. She had organised all, like, she had worked with Patrick through all the funding, through all this stuff and got the bill started. And then she headed off to the Civic. And so I came in. So I was kind of, but I came in around the same time as Caoimhe, really. So both of us kind of landed into this project that didn't have any structure or didn't really know where it was going. And so there had been misunderstandings along the way, because there had been lots of different conversations with lots of different people, but none of it had been kind of brought into a central place. And so I kind of just thought the best way around that was just by laying all the cards on the table. And so that's kind of what we started with.
Yeah, one amazing, beautiful building and a huge, city theatre resource and an arts resource. But back in those days, it was like, I can imagine the belt and braces approach of kind of, getting it ready must have been incredible. I mean, you're talking there, Caoimhe, about, very basic operational things needing to be put in. And I suppose, there'd be a whole other kind of podcast interview about that journey. But what interests me, seeing as we're talking about you two as individuals, is where that working relationship developed for what would end up becoming, a kind of a professional team. Is there kind of, even now looking to kind of put a narrative on it, but is there a sense of kind of different points in that journey? Say, Cliona, maybe first.
Yeah, well, I suppose, as Caoimhe said, she was brought into this project management to finish the build, and then she was going to leave. And we worked so well together on that bit of the project, and I was trying to staff the place. So I basically strong-armed her into not leaving and staying on as a staff member. And so there was 3 of us really that were there, or 4 of us, I suppose, from the start, actually, because Paul, myself, Caoimhe, and Dave, the technical manager. And so everybody had a hand in working together in terms of putting together the program and putting together the facilities and working out what the voice of Smock was going to be and working out all those kind of things. And so we got an awful lot of chances to really question each other and to find out each other's, because you were starting with a blank piece of paper in one way. And so it was a real opportunity to really find out quite quickly what people's moxie was, I suppose, and what they wanted to achieve, because we were all very ambitious and wanted this to succeed. So there was lots of rows and arguments, but through it all, then you find out the ways that people work, and the ways that their mind works, and so we did it because there was such a small group of us. It was quite intimate, I suppose, and quite like, you know, so that you were kind of in your own bubble for quite a long time together. And so, yeah, you get to pick up the ticks and the quirks and the different things and understand better where someone is coming from. And so I think that really gave us an excellent basis then for going on to other projects.
And Caoimhe, for you, what was your role back, or your named role, let's say, back in those days? What role did you got?
I think it was it box office and marketing manager, Cliona?
Mm-hmm.
But there was only, you see, there was, as Cliona said, like she was actually officially running the Gaiety school. So, for example, the way that we had to open it was there was only going to be really room for kind of 2.5 salary staff. So what did you absolutely need to open the doors? And technical manager and somebody behind the desk to sell tickets and sell shows were deemed to be the first two before you put a catering manager and events manager. And then like once you can get it open front of the house, the whole thing can expand that way. And so I was in there, but as Cliona said, there was so many projects. Like we were looking at everything from box office systems to what's behind the bar to, we had both worked in front of house, obviously, for years, as Cliona mentioned, doing a lot of work with her mother. We had worked with a lot of festivals and we knew audiences, actually. We knew audiences really well. We had been involved in a lot of different types of events and we had strong ideas about programming, about what people liked and about the correct way to do things. We both had the same bugbears that sometimes theatre makes people feel slightly stupid, or there's a sort of an elitist attitude to it that neither of us had experienced because obviously we were so steeped in it, and we wanted to break down the barriers. We both weirdly did our schooling through Irish, and so, you know, there's an element of Grá for Gaeilge there, and, you know, all of these things, so many different little threads that you have to pull, and when you do that with somebody you realize, oh yeah, you know. And so rather than these collaboration sessions been in any way conflict, there's quite a lot of yes ands. You know, when we start to have ideas, we spark off each other very well and we move very quickly, and I think that was probably undeniable for both of us.
And can I ask then, because, you know, that's a piece I'm really interested in, because you have, you know, you mentioned a lot of people there, and you both kind of have had huge experiences in your career and in your lives with kind of strong people, you know, with strong-minded people and leaders, and you are to yourselves. And I suppose that sense of, yeah, those collaboration spaces between yourselves and the early negotiations. I'm just fascinated about kind of two strong-minded people coming together and kind of going, okay, and I mean, I think the space you talk about is great, Caoimhe, but how do you actually negotiate that amount of freedom, or did it just happen?
Wine, Mark. Lots of wine.
Perfect. That's right. Cliona, was it wine for you as well?
Yeah, a lot of good Vina Sal. No, but I do remember actually at one point, Caoimhe, I'd say it was probably about a year in or a year and a half in, and I would be someone that as a boss, even or even just as a person or as a colleague, I question everything, but I don't question everything in a negative sense. I question everything because I want to know where you come up with it, or if you believe in it, or how you believe in it, and where you want it to go. I got better at my questioning because I mean I think possibly back then it might have come across that way or something. But I remember, I remember myself and Caoimhe, we did have one little moment anyway, where I think
I hate being questioned, Mark. I'm like, don't question.
But I think it was about a year and a half in where Caoimhe realised, I don't know what particular project it was on or what was going on, but I think it was just where Caoimhe clicked. Oh, she's not actually questioning me or my work. She's actually asking a question. It's different. And I think I remember you coming to me and going, I get it now. I was like, oh, great, brilliant. Okay, excellent. So like those things take time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, they absolutely do. And I suppose I kind of go forward to come back again. The idea for Seen and Heard, where did it emerge from?
Originally, in Smock Alley, actually one of the very first festivals that took place, and it was before the box office was built or the bar was built, and there was like one desk at one end and one desk at one end, which was the bar, and the box office was a bucket of ice with some beers stuck into it, and it was the Jack Burdell Collaborations Festival. And so that was set up by it was Jen and Clara and John, wasn't it? So yeah, so they had set up collaborations, and they had run collaborations for, I think, they had run it for 2 years, and then we had produced it the third year, because all these people had other jobs and they just felt it was too much to do. And it was a new work festival, quite similar in terms of new works of it was mainly theatre based, I think, and they had blocks and they had different time elements and that kind of stuff on it. And so the third year, where they were too busy to run it, we kind of produced it for them, and then the next year they kind of wanted out, and so we had felt that it was a really good resource, I suppose, for young artists. And at the same time that they kind of wanted to leave collaborations behind, other things had closed down that had been happening, like new work stuff, like 10 Days in Dublin had gone for a few years and had stopped, and Theatre Machine had gone for a while and stopped, and so there was different things that were stopping, and it seems that there was kind of no place for new work at that point. And so we sat down to talk about how we could run something similar to collaborations, but there were lots of things we wanted to change about it once we got our hands on it. And one of the main things was really about audience. As Caoimhe had mentioned, like we both know audiences very well, and we like being part of the audience, and we think about the audience quite a lot when we're doing anything. And so we wanted to create something that was yes, a platform for new work and a resource for young and emerging and established and people changing parts of their career and all that kind of stuff from the artist's point of view. But also we really wanted something to engage audiences in the creation of new work, of getting a buy-in for bigger versions of that work, of having people having their voice and having their say. And so it also came about with a lot of wine. This is going to be terrible. You're going to have to edit these bits out, Mark.
I'm editing nothing. Caoimhe, in relation to that, can you just speak a bit about the audience side of it? Because we come back to the artist piece in a minute, but just around the importance of that and opening up new work to audiences.
Wow, what a huge question. Where shall I start?
Even hard.
Yes, I mean, there's a kind of a, if I'm understanding what you're saying, there's a sort of a, did the chicken or the egg come first? And so, you know, you're obviously on the one hand reading and reviewing submissions, but at the same time, you're imagining this experience from an audience member's point of view, and then you're starting to imagine who that audience member is. As a programmer, I think it's really important. You're not, you know, I'm not programming stuff that Caoimhe Connolly loves. I mean, maybe 2% of it is my actual taste, but you are seeing the merits in programming work for other groups of people. And I think all the time you're looking at maybe interests, gender, age profile, you know, background, political background, maybe religious background. And then obviously the beauty of art is that when it's really good, there's a universal core story that transcends language, and there's an emotive thing that happens in live performance that happens. And so I think we spend a lot of time talking to people and going to shows and meeting, and you start to see these tribes and who the tribes are and who's interested in Japanese buto and who likes traditional Irish music and who's a visual art connoisseur and who likes stand-up comedy, and these things reveal themselves. You start to understand maybe how tribes work. And so I think in programming a festival, you're probably trying to provide as varied a program as you can to hopefully touch the lives of as many audience members as,
sorry, just
does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, and it actually leads me on to another one. And kind of being semi-facetious, you know, I think you used the word tribes there, you know, and I think that's what's fascinating about well, that's what I was going to say, yeah. you took my line from me. That's interesting from the seen and heard Smock Alley experience, because you do get a sense of different tribes within that space, and particularly like the last couple of years kind of been more involved with the festival through here and seeing an awful lot of work for the last 3 or 4 years. Is the sense of that in February you're kind of having packed houses for work that hasn't been seen by anyone, with people that nobody knows in the main, work that is somewhat, can be anything from stand-up to, installation art to a new play, and sometimes all of those things at once. But the collision of people is phenomenal, and I think that's kind of interesting. That rather than looking at it as audiences and how do we bring audiences, is how do we tap into those tribes? And is that something that sounds like is a very overt thing for you, Caoimhe?
Yeah, for both of us. I mean, I think, as you're aware, I'm sure you know that we run producers workshops. So the artists that we're programming in a particular year, firstly, we're trying to program from as many counties as we can in as many different art forms, with as many different ideas, with as many different, we try to review the program so that we make sure that there's not too many things that have overlapping themes or too similar, and we're quite rigorous about that. So there's that. But then I think particularly the last festival we just had in 2020, I think we had made a few changes in advance of that in terms of our own method of communication to our artists in a few different ways, but essentially we spoke to everybody all the time. And I think that changed something fundamentally for us, because we always talk about finding these tribes in a kind of a blathering or a sort of a sales sense. But I think something happens when you can exponentially put out a message. And I think something happened when we were meeting with everybody, when it's our hands on it, when we're getting down and dirty, as it were, and we're going around town with beer mats and programs and talking to people, and you're literally, exponentially, it's a real feeling. It's not just sending a press release out there. You're living it. I think what happens is everybody takes that message and they make it their own, and then they run with it. And something happens in terms of they have ownership. I really feel like people feel like they have ownership over their own work and the festival. And so a lot of people that would never even know us, you can hear them, oh, have you heard about Seen and Heard? And so I think that it's lovely that the festival is known separately to Caoimhe and Cliona, if you know what I mean.
Cliona, I think just following on from that, and I think there's something really interesting about, say, as someone who runs, an art centre as well, and as someone who programs and produces and all that sort of stuff too. I think it's fascinating in that really owning something in order to give it away again. Because I think where a trick is missed sometimes is people don't own things, and then it kind of is left in the middle. Do you know what I mean? That kind of, and I think that requires a lot of trust between the artists that you work with and you, that you're not taking anything from them. So you're taking ownership of their work into your festival, but purely in order to give it away again. Mm-hmm. And I think that's not something that kind of is easily built. So just talk about that in relation to your work with artists, say.
That's a massive question.
Sorry, but let's break it down a bit. Sorry, in relation to how, I mean, am I right in thinking that's kind of part of the ethos of the way that you work, as in relation to kind of bringing them in under the wing of the festival in order to...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that, and I think as Caoimhe pointed out, this year just gone, we made a lot of changes, and speaking to artists who'd been in the festival previously to this year, they felt those changes, which was great, and they felt them in a positive way. So I think it was, we had always been quite focused on the tribes and on the audience and on that stuff. And I think this year we very much focused on creating our tribe as much as creating these tribes, if you get me. And so, but yeah, absolutely. It is a thing of bringing it under, and we work really hard to in terms of the program, when we put it, by the time we put the program together, we've met all the different artists, we've discussed what they want to get out of the festival, and be that a rate, and that it covers such a range of things what artists want to be in the festival for. It's not necessarily to promote that particular piece of work. It could be to promote their writing in general, or their directing in general, or their acting chops in general, or it could be that particular piece of work. But also where they want to go with those things is entirely different. And so it's a whole gamut of things. So after meeting all those things, we do work hard on trying to find those audiences for those people, or those particular connections for those people, especially in the industry, and connecting people up throughout the industry in that way. And we try and promote all of them equally, which is difficult with 109 shows, but because they all want different things, it makes it much easier for us, because it's not like you're just trying to sell, 109 shows to Joe Soap. You're actually trying to place them in different parts of society or the industry or different things. And so it makes it way easier for us when we know all that. And so when we have all that information, we can then work on that with them. And it's not that we do it all day. Like we sit and give them advice and say, these are places you should talk to, or people you should talk to, or places you should go. And then they can take that off as well. I mean, yeah. And afterwards, we've been asked so many times, like, what are the shows you're most proud of? And Caoimhe always puts it so perfectly, because she kind of says, you don't want to say, I didn't create this show. I'm not proud of this show in the sense of, it's my show that I'm proud of. And so it's, we're delighted that all these shows could go on and be bigger and better, or these artists can get something out of it and bring that to the next thing. But it's not necessarily that you kind of go, well, this was the hit, or this was the, the thing that we have the pride in. We're proud of it in its entirety. It sounds like a really wishy-washy answer, I suppose, but.
And I suppose, Caoimhe, just in relation to, I suppose come back to this again, in relation to that feeling that, that you had when you were younger, that feeling of kind of the stuff that you really, got off and being involved in, and the piece that kind of got you to India, Berlin, and kind of, following that. Is that the same buzz? I mean, that's probably a very different buzz, but is that the same, like, what is that kind of feeling for you now, working through the auspices of kind of developing, producing, creating for other people?
Yeah, that's quite an interesting question. I think for many years, whenever I'm doing something that's entirely one-sided, so if it's producing is creative, but as you say, at a festival level, you're maybe not directly involved with the creating of the art of a show, whereas when you're the creative producer of a show, maybe you're more involved creatively. And I think I hadn't noticed for a while, I had done a couple of jobs back to back that were quite, shall we say, operations and systems orientated. And I think it started to eat away, unbeknownst to myself, at my kind of soul a little bit. And after a good few years of that, I didn't realize how jaded I was when I didn't have my own creative output. And so maybe 5 years ago, I started working with sound. And so that's just my own really love, in terms of various sound collaborations. I did an art installation on a plinth that was the artist in my headphones. Somebody took it off the plinth, so they had this whole creative, it was like supposed to be the sonic equivalent of an artist's creative process. And I had created that from interviewing people and then turning it into a soundscape, and projects like that, as well as making music theater or making crazy late night beats and or rock and roll and thing. And I think once I had that outlet, I didn't find the other side of it difficult. But I think I do, if it's too admin orientated for me, I definitely start to go a bit stir crazy.
Yeah. And Cliona, what about yourself, in relation, because I suppose the question, it's kind of the same question in a way, but I remember I was heavily involved in youth theatre when I kind of left college, and still kind of, was acting, and that's what I wanted to do, and was in bands and all that sort of stuff. But I remember getting called for an audition for Michael Collins, the movie, when it was kind of coming out, and I went in and met the casting director and did my piece, and then spoke, and then she was talking to me for 20 minutes about one of the kids in the youth theatre. and I came out going, here. Yeah. But so, I mean, is there moments, and I think, you know, there are kind of hard moments to talk about because you kind of feel guilty about kind of, you know, having any ego in a way, but is there any sense for you that you need to kind of balance that for yourself, Cliona?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what Caoimhe is saying, and, you know, I don't miss the acting side of things at all, I have to say. And in terms of projects that I take on, in terms of creative side of things, I've started working a lot now in live TV that Caoimhe dragged me into a couple of years ago. And so, but I'm working on a lot of proposals now for different TV stuff, which lets me be creative in terms of coming up with these ideas and putting them together, and you know, a creative producer role in those senses. And I really enjoy that part of it. I really want to try my hand at directing because I think my mother might have been onto something. So I think that's something I'm going to start looking at in the future, because I give out about enough of it. So I suppose I should put my money where my mouth is, and give it a go, see if I'm any good.
Oh, watch this space. That could be... and sorry, just you mentioned the role, and I think, you know, I think one of you mentioned about the fact of having the festival going, and the fact that you both come from very different but very similar backgrounds, and the huge input music is for you, Caoimhe. I'm fascinated by, you know, the push in you to, like, say, I'm using kind of Seen and Heard as a hope to kind of talk about this, but it's not just about the creative production piece of facilitating artists, getting it on, doing nuts and bolts, but it's also then about kind of, you know, landing out here and kind of going, look, you should come and see these shows, or these people are great, and also then, as you said, Caoimhe, the development of producer workshops and the whole role of creative production. And I think that's so I would see the role of, like, venue managers or whatever they're called differently. I just kind of buy the word venue, but like the kind of role of someone who runs a center as being a creative producer, and that kind of, but that creative role or word is very important within that. And I think maybe just have a chatting with that from Caoimhe.
Well, I think at the core of it, it is about this exponential idea. You know, our industry is small, but whenever we have cause to be in a room together, you become acutely aware of how many excellent people run these venues all over the country. Really wonderful, witty, interesting people. And I suppose probably because of Cliona and I, because of our backgrounds, we've always known these people, and we've been around for years in terms of venues and who's gone through the venues and these patterns. And so I think there can be an isolating factor if you're running a venue in Sligo, or you're in Cork, or you're the only venue in Galway. And so theatre forum conferences or these things are wonderful to have an opportunity to come together. But I think we knew that we needed to build the community outwards, and you can't do anything separately. You've got to all bandy together, because all these people, we're all trying to push in the same direction. And so in terms of reaching out to people like yourselves in Access, or you know, it was a kind of a no-brainer for us. We just thought, let's just go and talk to everybody, and we'll just find out, like, what are you up to, and figure out if there's any kind of links that can be drawn, parallels with artists or programming. Or you sometimes you go and meet these people and you don't really know what the conversation. You don't have an agenda. You just go, you show up and figure out. And then when you're there, you get an idea, or you think, oh yeah, actually I know that person I can introduce you to, and you'll talk to them, and that person is trying to do it. And I think the more we can all do that, particularly now in these very strange times. Well, once we're done with our Zen creative practice mode and, you know, baking sourdough or what have you, we need to figure out how we're going to come together and strengthen it, because I think it's going to be a slog.
I agree. And just in case this is being viewed somewhere in a couple of 100 years in a kind of archive on YouTube somewhere, this is in the middle of, well, sorry, right in the middle of a pandemic here in the world. I was going to say in Ireland, but in the world, where we're looking at whether theatre is going to be able to open, you know, anytime soon. Cliona, in relation to just that.
All the time.
Yeah, sorry. In relation, and by the way, sourdough is something which I feel is completely alien to anything. I'm wondering at all that. Anyway, Cliona, sorry, in relation to that creative production piece, in relation to you being interested in the directing piece, in relation to, you know, audiences and artists, is there one thing that you've kind of held true to yourself, do you think, since you've kind of started? Is there one kind of, is there a piece of, and I'm not saying a piece of work, is there something though that you kind of go, that's kind of, yeah, that's what I want to feel, not necessarily what I want to make, but that's kind of what I want to feel?
I think Seen and Heard this year for me was an amalgamation of everything. That it's not that things didn't go wrong, because lots of things went wrong, as they do in every festival, but that's part of B2, I suppose. So yeah, the feeling this year, this year felt different, and this and I don't know whether it was year 5. We'd taken a lot of lessons and we tried to change things up. This year we lived together, actually, which we hadn't previously, myself and Caoimhe. So this year we lived together for the whole set, like from the get-go of setting up the festival throughout the festival. So I don't know if maybe that also just made it more real or something. Well, you couldn't get away from it. It was there all the time.
What was that feeling like? So is there a change? Like what did that feel like?
It felt more. It felt like it mattered more, and it felt like it was reaching more people, and it felt that people got what we were trying to do, and that people were on board with it. And I suppose this year, like you mentioned, and for people who don't know, really, this year Seen and Heard for the first year did a support series of so panels from the industry, which you were part of. And so we had the panels from the industry come in, and I just loved them, and I loved them because, you know, you're seeing 15 amazing people on a panel but the fact that everyone was facing the same issues, whether they're in Cork or in Galway or in Dublin, and the fact, like some of the artists who were attending afterwards, one of them I remember saying to us, they're real people too. About the venue managers, and it's just it's a throwaway comment and a joke in a sense, but it's not really, because sometimes people see that or feel that these are separate people, or that they don't understand the lives of artists, or that they don't get, they're not working for them, or and it was just gorgeous to see 15 venue managers talking, and really honestly about the problems they face, what they can provide for artists, how to get in touch with them, that kind of stuff. And to see the audience really kind of, or the participants really kind of engage with that, and kind of like we had mingling sessions afterwards of tea and coffee and just people having the chats, and it just felt good.
Well, that's a brilliant answer. It just felt good. And I think that one of the main drivers behind these the Access Chats, was about that very simple phrase, they're real people too, and actually more geared towards the public, kind of looking in at artists and people who work in the arts, kind of going, all right, they actually do not just exist in a bubble of us going to see things or watch them on telly or whatever, or hear about them, that they actually do share. They all were children too.
Yeah.
And Caoimhe, same question. What is it what is your, that kind of quest, that kind of, what's that feeling that you want to feel?
I think it is that simple. I think as I joke with Claire Connolly when we see her, a long-time supporter of the festival, exponential good vibes, and it is as simple as it feels good, and it's beyond you. It's not about credit. You walk into a room, like particularly on the program launch night, and there's 500 people there, and everybody is just buzzing about this book and talking about shows, and there's just, it's what we're missing now that all the venues are closed. There's a frisson in the air that comes from electric energy that happens when artists get together and audiences, and there's an atmospheric jolt, I think, that I probably am addicted to.
Okay, I'm actually going to leave it there. Both those answers are an amazing way to finish, and certainly you provide that to the people that come into your circle. So thanks very, very much for taking part in this, and can't wait to see you again properly.
Yeah.
With maybe a glass of wine, hopefully closely in the future.
Thanks a million, Mark.
A million.